Takumi finds himself transported to another world, standing before the goddess Nolan. The first thing she does is offer a heartfelt apology, explaining that his summoning was a complete mistake. She reveals that when a summoning spell is cast, it typically targets a random group of Earth's losers to transport them to another world. However, Takumi's life was actually going quite well, so he wasn't supposed to be included. Unfortunately, due to a mishap, he was swept up in the summoning process along with everyone else. The blame falls on the Holy Sidonia Empire, which recklessly activated the summoning spell. Since Takumi wasn't intended to be summoned, Nolan brought him directly to her instead of sending him to Sidonia with the other summoned heroes. Takumi asks Nolan if she can simply send him back to Earth, given that his summoning was a mistake. Unfortunately, she explains that it's not possible. Out of sheer anger at Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell, she immediately removed it from this world's magical laws, ensuring that no one could travel between worlds anymore. As a result, Takumi is now permanently stuck here. To make matters worse, the summoning process technically killed him. When Takumi realizes he's now a disembodied ghost, he begins to panic, but Nolan reassures him that there's no need to worry. While she can't return him to Earth, she can provide him with a new body and help him start a new life as a citizen of this world. As an apology, since this is partially her fault, she offers to grant him her blessing to make his life easier. Takumi doesn't really have much of a choice, so he agrees to be reborn into this world. Nolan is glad to hear that because it makes this a lot easier for her. She tells him to open his status screen to check out the new life he will have. When Takumi does, he finds out that Nolan is planning to give him a 17-year-old body, even though he's 40. Nolan tells him not to bother with the minor details. More importantly, he still needs to pick out his job. She tells him that there are two main classes for jobs. If Takumi wants something more combat-focused, he can pick things like swordsman, knight, or hunter. But if that doesn't appeal to him, he could always pick one of the production jobs instead. Takumi isn't too keen on the idea of fighting, so he opts for a production-focused job instead. Nolan proceeds to embed the job into his soul, along with several extra blessings, before sending him on his way, completely forgetting to provide any sort of tutorial. Takumi crash lands in the middle of a forest, and after managing to get back on his feet, he catches his reflection in a nearby river. It's then he realizes he's truly become a different person, and to his amazement, his arthritis is gone. Deciding to make the most of his new situation, he checks the bag Nolan left with him to see what he's been given. Inside, he finds some food rations and money, which means he doesn't need to worry about starving for the time being. Takumi checks his status screen and sees that Nolan really went all out, granting him an impressive array of useful skills. Among them, he notices elemental magic, so he decides to test it out. Holding out his hand, he calls out "Water Ball," and instantly, a sphere of water forms in his palm. The other elements work just as seamlessly, and Takumi is able to use them effortlessly on his first attempt. With his newfound magic abilities figured out, he begins to consider his next steps and decides to make his way to the nearest village. While walking, Takumi comes across a stick in the middle of the path. It looks like a really nice stick, so he uses his appraisal skill to scan it and finds out that this is Trent wood. It's gotten from a wood monster and is really useful for making things like magic staves and spears. Takumi decides to put his modeling skill to the test and uses it on the wood to create a spear. Since the wood works so well, Takumi decides to scan around to see if there are any other useful plants nearby. He finds a ton of them, so he spends the next hour picking them. However, he doesn't know what to do with all these plants since they definitely won't fit in his bag. He might have to leave them behind. But then Takumi remembers that he has an item box skill, so he uses it to store all the plants. Suddenly, Takumi hears a scream nearby. Moments later, a little girl bursts out of the bushes and runs straight to him, pleading for help because a monster is chasing her. When Takumi turns to see the creature, he's faced with a massive, horned rabbit. The rabbit charges at him with incredible speed, nearly impaling him, but at the last moment, Takumi panics and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. He's stunned that a beginner like him managed to defeat such a creature, and assumes it must be thanks to Lady Nolan's blessing. In reality, the goddess had nothing to do with it. It was pure dumb luck. After his fight, Takumi is granted the job title of warrior, much to his dismay, as he had hoped to avoid combat entirely. However, he sets that aside for now and checks to see if the little girl is unharmed. She introduces herself as Molly and assures him she's fine, explaining that she was out gathering herbs but wandered too far from Board Village and ended up getting attacked. When Molly mentions a village, Takumi gets excited and asks if he can go there. Molly agrees to guide him, but first points out that the rabbit's meat is delicious and asks if he's planning to take it with him. Realizing it would be a waste to leave it behind, Takumi stuffs the rabbit into his item box. Only then does it hit him that he just revealed his item box skill in front of Molly, even though he intended to keep it a secret. Resigned to his slip-up, Takumi follows Molly as they begin their journey to the village. At the same time, the other people who got summoned have just arrived in the Empire of Sidonia, and they are incredibly confused about what's going on. None of them are hurt, but they have no idea where they are. All of a sudden, they hear someone call out to them as heroes. A woman approaches and tells them that they are no longer in their original world and that they have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself to them as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth, and one look at her face makes the kids realize that she's shady as hell. Just then, Akane's unique skill kicks in, and it seems Nolan granted her the blessing of revelation. If she follows her gut instinct, she will naturally arrive at the right answer. And right now, Akane's gut is telling her that Elizabeth is a traitor, so she can't be trusted. By the time Takumi arrives in Board Village, Molly's parents come out to greet him and thank him for rescuing their daughter. Molly's father introduces himself as Banga, while her mother is Martha. They express their admiration for Takumi, assuming he must be a very responsible person to have traveled such a long distance on his own. Takumi takes the opportunity to ask if it would be possible for him to stay in the village for a while, explaining that he has nowhere else to go. Banga and Martha warmly welcome him, but mention that, unfortunately, there isn't an inn in the village, so there's currently no place for him to stay. However, they suggest a solution. The villagers can build him a house. Soon, the entire village gathers around an empty plot of land, ready to get started. Wanting to contribute in some way, Takumi decides to use his earth magic to flatten the ground for the foundation. It's the first time he's used magic on such a large scale, and the effort nearly causes him to pass out from mana depletion. The villagers are all amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily. Takumi asks if they think he just did something strange, but they tell him not to worry about it, since he has taken care of the foundation. The rest of them get to work assembling his house for him. By the next morning, Takumi's house is completed. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi is able to make a good set of furniture for himself. But there's something else he's been meaning to try out. He got a bunch of ores from the village blacksmith, Boron, and he wants to try using alchemy to extract the metal. Takumi finds himself with iron ore, silver ore, copper ore, and even some magic iron ore. Starting with the iron, he decides to try making an iron ingot. Normally, this process would require a large furnace and several hours of labor, but thanks to his alchemy skill, he's able to do it instantly. However, the process consumes a significant amount of his mana. His first attempt at ore extraction is a success, and Takumi is thrilled with the result. Excited by the possibilities, he resolves to extract as much as he can so he'll have plenty of materials to work with later. After a few hours, Molly stops by Takumi's house to bring him some dinner. When she opens the door, she's horrified to find him collapsed on the floor, looking completely drained. It turns out Takumi had pushed himself too hard with the ore extraction and came dangerously close to dying from mana depletion. Luckily, Martha and Banga gave him a recovery potion, bringing him back to normal. While Takumi is eager to continue practicing his alchemy, he had to promise them he wouldn't overdo it again. Over time, Takumi extracts a bunch of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold, allowing him to make a ton of useful tools. Once he is done with his alchemy practice, he spends time with Boron in the forge, learning how to make all kinds of weapons. The blade he forges turns out really well, and once Boron is done making the sheath, it will be complete. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now at level 40, so he's done practicing that for now and decides to move on to something else. Takumi approaches Banga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions. Banga agrees without hesitation, but he mentions that the potions he has are basic and might not be very useful. Takumi assures him that's fine, explaining that he just needs an example to use as a template. He plans to create his own potions using the herbs he collected from the forest. Impressed by Takumi's initiative, Banga offers his full support and even says he'll buy some potions from him once the first batch is ready. Takumi thanks Banga and, with the basic potion in hand, begins crafting his own version. He uses hilcock leaves and water to create it, carefully following his process. Once finished, he pours the potion into a glass jar and compares it to the one Banga provided. Both are blue, but the potion Takumi made is noticeably more vibrant and appears to contain traces of magic. Despite the promising appearance, Takumi isn't sure if it's a success. He knows he needs to test it to confirm it's safe, but the thought of potentially poisoning himself makes him hesitant to take the risk. To build up some poison tolerance, he decides to eat whatever questionable items he can find until he's about to die, and then use healing magic to cure himself. After a couple of hours of this self-destructive experiment, he feels absolutely terrible. On the bright side, curing himself so much has granted him the purification skill, which will definitely come in handy at some point. As Takumi is getting back to his feet, he hears a noise behind him and finds a massive boar staring him down. The boar is clearly hostile, so Takumi readies his spear to defend himself. However, as the boar charges, the spear breaks on impact, leaving the boar unscathed and Takumi defenseless. Desperate, he uses every type of magic at his disposal, but nothing seems to harm the boar. As if things couldn't get any worse, he catches sight of a poison spider creeping up behind him, poised to strike. Takumi realizes he's completely cornered. Instead of attacking Takumi, the spider turns its attention to the boar, throwing off its charge and causing it to miss him. However, the boar isn't backing down and continues its assault, leaving Takumi with little time to react. So far, none of his physical attacks have worked, but there's still one tactic he hasn't tried. As the boar charges at him again, Takumi leaps into the air and, at the moment of impact, uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head to break it down. His quick thinking pays off, allowing him to survive the encounter. Now that he's safe, Takumi decides to check on the spider since it helped him out earlier. The spider is in really poor shape after being hit by the boar. Takumi decides to heal it so it doesn't die. Afterwards, he gets up to return to the village, but then he receives a notification telling him that he has successfully tamed the spider. He didn't realize it was even possible to tame a spider, but he's hesitant to take it with him since spiders are considered dangerous monsters. The spider gives Takumi an adorable look with its cutesy eyes, and despite everything, he decides to accept it as his pet. To make it official, he names her Maple. Not long after, Takumi returns to the village, proudly showing off the massive boar he managed to kill. The villagers are impressed by his feat, but their amazement grows even more when they see the poisonous spider he's tamed. No one has ever accomplished such a thing before, leaving them in awe of Takumi's abilities. Putting that aside, Takumi suggests that the villagers share the boar since there's no way he can finish it on his own. That evening, the village throws a grand feast in his honor. While everyone else is enjoying the festivities, Banga approaches Takumi with the valuable leftovers from the boar and advises him to sell them in the nearest city, Bolton. With that, Takumi decides that Bolton will be his next destination. Meanwhile, Goddess Nolan has been keeping an eye on Takumi and is delighted by how well he's doing. One of her fellow goddesses questions her intentions, asking what she hopes to accomplish by giving Takumi such extraordinary treatment. After all, she provided him with a special body, a unique blessing, and even sent him back an entire year before Sidonia activated the summoning spell. Nolan, however, simply replies that she doesn't have any specific motive. She's just following what she believes to be the right thing to do. The next morning, Takumi wakes up to discover he's tied up in bed, instantly realizing that Maple is the one responsible. Maple apologizes, explaining that she has been feeling really lonely because Takumi has been so busy lately, and she just wanted to grab his attention. Takumi reflects and understands that he has been so caught up in his work that he hasn't been spending much time with Maple. Determined to make it up to her, he decides to take the day off from work and spend time playing with Maple, which makes her incredibly happy. Just then, Martha walks in to bring Takumi some lunch. It looks like something weird is going on between Takumi and Maple, but Takumi assures her that it's not what she thinks. Martha takes his word for it, but she can't help but notice that the silk Maple produced looks really nice. She plans to milk Maple dry of as much silk as she can. Later that day, Martha manages to craft a shirt made from spider silk, and all the women in the village are completely enamored with the texture of the fabric. Takumi is surprised to learn that spider silk is in such high demand. The women explain that spider silk is considered a luxury material, usually only affordable to nobles. Martha then asks Maple if she could produce more silk for her. Maple begins squirting it out, but the process is slow and time-consuming, meaning she won't have the chance to play with Takumi for a while. Takumi is a little disappointed since he was looking forward to spending time with Maple for once, but he still has things to do anyway, so he's not too bothered. It has been roughly a month since Takumi first came to this village, and he intends to head to the city and study his alchemy. However, he can't bring himself to say goodbye to all the villagers after spending so much time with them. Takumi heads over to the forge to meet with Boron and continue honing his blacksmithing skills. Before long, they successfully craft a chest plate that fits Takumi perfectly, along with a pair of steel toe boots. Boron mentions that the boots could come in handy if Takumi ever needs to kick something, but Takumi quickly clarifies that he has no intention of fighting, as his true focus is on becoming an alchemist. Just then, Banga shows up, and he's glad to see that Takumi's armor is finally complete. However, he admits he's going to miss Takumi once he's gone. He knows Takumi can't stay here forever if he wants to expand his production business. It's the logical move for him to head to the city, where he can sell more goods and get a reliable supply of materials. A trader from Bolton is going to come to the village in a couple of days, so Banga arranged for Takumi to ride with him on his way back to Bolton. Though they're sad to see him leave, they understand it's for the best and encourage Takumi to start getting his things ready. Grateful for all their support, Takumi thanks them and begins heading back to his house to pack up. On the way, he crosses paths with Martha, who is carrying a bucket of meat. Curious, he asks what she's up to, and Martha explains that she's on her way to dispose of the innards of a horned rabbit that Banga caught. She mentions that while the innards are considered the tastiest part of the rabbit, they require careful processing to eliminate any diseases or parasites. This village doesn't have the equipment necessary to do that, so she has to throw the meat away so no one gets sick. However, Takumi tells her that won't be necessary since he can just purify the meat. He bends down and uses purification magic, so the meat in the bucket should be safe to eat now. While Martha is indeed thankful, she is equally stunned that Takumi can use light magic. She tells him that he probably shouldn't reveal he can use light magic when he leaves this village because very few people in this world are capable of it. If people found out, it would draw a lot of unwanted attention. Takumi takes her warning to heart and vows to be cautious about revealing his powers. However, while he remains in the village, he decides to use his abilities to improve their quality of life as much as possible. Using earth magic, he constructs a sturdy brick wall to enhance the village's security. For added convenience, he installs a water pump and creates a few other useful amenities. By the time he finishes, the village has been completely transformed, looking like an entirely new place. When the merchant arrives, he barely recognizes it. Banga comes out to greet Papek, and after completing a trade deal, Takumi walks up so they can start going. Papek has already heard a lot about Takumi from Banga, so he introduces himself, and everyone asks if Takumi has all his stuff ready. Takumi assures them he hasn't forgotten anything, but there is one thing he wants to give them. He takes a potion from his bag and hands it to Banga, mentioning that he already left around 100 of these bottles at Banga's house, in case of any emergencies. He wants Banga to use them to heal injuries. Papek, stunned by the quality of the potion, asks if he can take a closer look. Upon examining it, he confirms that it's a high-level potion. The rest of the villagers soon show up to bid Takumi farewell. Papek says he will wait for them to finish their goodbyes before he leaves. Molly says goodbye to Maple, who's sleeping in Takumi's sack, and Martha hands him an outfit she and the other ladies made for him out of Maple's silk. Takumi is really grateful for their thoughtful gift and thanks everyone once more for being so kind to him, even though they haven't known him long. He climbs into the carriage, and the villagers give him a warm and heartfelt send-off, assuring him that he will always have a place in their village. As Papek and Takumi set out for Bolton, Papek comments on how much the villagers clearly adore him. Even the others in the carriage can sense that Takumi was like family to the villagers, and the emotional farewell deeply touches Heath's heart. By the way, the group, also heading to Bolton, introduces themselves. The blonde guy introduces himself as Heath. The redhead is Real, and the gloomy-looking guy over there is named Bogger. They are part of a C-rank party called Lion Fang and are serving as Papek's bodyguards. However, the region is quite peaceful, leaving them with little to do. Real notices Takumi clutching his bag tightly and asks if he's carrying something valuable inside. Takumi responds, explaining that his pet killer spider is sleeping inside. The group is shocked that Takumi managed to tame such a dangerous creature. Real, however, insists on seeing the spider but comes across as overly creepy about it. Maple responds by headbutting him right in the face. Takumi immediately begins apologizing for Maple's actions, but the others reassure him there's no need, as Real completely deserved it. In fact, Heath jokes that after meeting Real, Maple might end up fearing all humans from now on. However, that doesn't seem to be the case since she seems to have taken a liking to Bogger. While everyone starts fawning over Maple, Papek calls Takumi to the front because he wants to talk about the potion he saw Takumi holding earlier. He asks if there are any more of those in stock because, if so, he would love to buy some. Takumi doesn't really mind selling Papek the potions, but all of a sudden, his horse stops, and it looks like there's trouble ahead. There is a horde of goblins surrounding the carriage for an attack, which is really bad news. The group seems eager that they finally have a chance to take action. They tell Takumi and Papek to relax and leave everything to them as they step onto the field. With about 20 goblins scattered across the area, they're confident in their abilities and dive into the fight. Real takes down the goblins from a distance with his bow, while Bogger and Heath handle the rest up close with their mace and axe. It doesn't take long before they've wiped out all the goblins. Afterward, they get to work dissecting the creatures to retrieve the magic stones. Soon after, everyone returns to the carriage, and their journey continues for 3 days until they reach Bolton. Upon entering the city, the Lion Fang members head to the Adventurers Guild to report the success of their bodyguard mission. Takumi accompanies them, as he also needs to register with the guild to remain in the city. Takumi would have preferred to join the Alchemist Guild, but since there isn't one in the area, he's left with no choice but to register as an adventurer instead. Hans, the receptionist, explains that Takumi can use the Adventurer Guild card as a form of identification, and as long as he completes at least one simple quest per month, the card will remain active. Takumi proceeds to register as an adventurer and introduces Maple as his pet. After all the registrations are complete, Takumi heads to Papek's trading company to work on a deal for the potions. He has roughly 100 of 3 different potions in stock, and all of them are extremely high quality. Papek is prepared to pay 10 silver coins for each healing and stamina potion and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does some quick math in his head and realizes that he would make over 7 million yen. Takumi feels that the amount of money mentioned is far too much, but Papek explains that he could have earned even more if he already had an established reputation as a producer. With that in mind, since Takumi plans to work as a producer in the city, Papek suggests finding a house with an attached workshop for convenience. However, this makes Takumi realize that he hadn't even considered where he would live once he arrived in the city. Papek decides to help him out a little and calls for his assistant, Thomas, so he can show Takumi a good property with an affordable rate. However, when Takumi finally sees the house, it looks way more like a mansion, so he doesn't think he can afford it. Thomas assures him that the mansion is quite affordable and guarantees that there are no ghosts here, so he won't have to worry about that. Takumi spots the workshop connected to the house and starts thinking seriously about purchasing it, as it would be ideal for his work. With the money he made from selling potions to Papek, he has enough to afford it. After considering it for a while, he decides to move forward and tells Thomas that he'll buy the mansion. Thomas is glad to hear that and says he will get started on the paperwork immediately so Takumi can move in tomorrow if he wants. As they're walking through the city streets, Takumi smells something foul in the air. Thomas can tell that the smell is bothering Takumi, so he explains that the foul stench is coming from the sewers. Wealthy individuals use magical purifiers to cleanse their sewage, but the main city sewers lack such a luxury. Magical purifiers are incredibly rare, as they can only be discovered in ancient ruins or dungeons, making them far too costly to install in the city's sewer system, while priests are occasionally hired to manually purify the sewers using magic. The sewers remain filthy for the majority of the time. The next day, Takumi and Maple move into their new house, and the first thing Takumi wants to do is find a solution to the sewer problem. He gets a piece of quartz and clay from Papek's company, and after using magic to shape it, he combines fire magic with space-time magic to bake it quickly. After doing that for a while, Takumi's mana is completely drained, so he has to drink a couple of mana potions. On the bright side, he does manage to complete his creation, a modern toilet. At that moment, Takumi hears Papek shouting from the living room. He hurries over to see what's happening and finds Papek completely wrapped in Maple's silk from head to toe. Confused, Takumi asks Maple why she would do such a thing, and she explains that she thought Papek would find it amusing. To her credit, the soft and soothing texture of her silk does put Papek to sleep, but that doesn't make it acceptable. Takumi apologizes sincerely for Maple's behavior. Papek assures him it's fine, though being suddenly tied up like that did startle him a bit, so he excuses himself to quickly use Takumi's restroom. However, as soon as he enters, he comes back out and starts asking what this marvel of technology is. Takumi comes over and explains that it's a toilet attached to a magical purification device, so it automatically cleans itself once you're done with your business. Basically, after you take a dump, it uses purification magic to break down waste into inorganic materials, which then get flushed down the drain. The setup makes perfect sense to Papek, but he points out that the only way such a thing could have been created is by someone with an aptitude for light magic. This makes Takumi realize he may have slipped up, as Martha had explicitly warned him against openly using his light magic. Worried, he asks Papek to keep this a secret. Understanding Takumi's concerns, Papek agrees not to tell anyone. However, he's so impressed that he insists on having some of these toilets and asks Takumi if he could make 100 of them. Takumi is hesitant to agree, as making just one toilet was a lot of work. But since Papek is so insistent, he agrees to do it as long as Papek can provide the raw materials. Papek is really happy to hear that, but he can't expect Takumi to make all those toilets by himself. So, he suggests that Takumi should make a slave contract. Takumi is startled by the suggestion, as he would never consider owning a slave. Papek explains that if Takumi wants to keep his abilities hidden, having a slave to assist him might be the safest option, as slaves are bound to secrecy. He emphasizes that possessing an aptitude for light magic is an extraordinary rarity, signifying divine favor, which would likely draw the attention of the Church of Divine Light. The Church might go to great lengths to force Takumi into working for them, making secrecy even more critical. The Church makes a lot of profit by monopolizing purification magic, so Papek doubts they would be happy to learn that commoners could have access to cheap purification through Takumi's toilets. However, Papek has an idea of how to get around the Church, so Takumi doesn't need to worry about it for now. The most important thing is making sure the Church doesn't find out about his light magic. That's why Papek insists that getting a slave would be the best option for him. Takumi remains strongly opposed to slavery and declares that he will manage all the work on his own. However, his guild card suddenly begins to glow. Upon checking it, he discovers a message requiring him to complete a verification quest to maintain his adventurer status. Realizing he won't have the time to finish the toilets on his own, he reluctantly agrees to buy a slave. Papek brings Takumi to the Mulan Trading Company, explaining that they are known as the most ethical slave traders in the area. While Papek goes to negotiate with the owner to secure a good deal for Takumi, Takumi wanders out into the garden, drawn by its beauty. In the garden, he spots a stunning elf girl sitting on a terrace. The moment she notices Takumi, she immediately tells him to leave. A short while later, Papik introduces Takumi to Mulan, the owner of the slave trading company. He informs her that Takumi is interested in purchasing a slave, although he points out that Takumi was quite hesitant about the idea. Curious, Mulan asks Takumi if there's a particular reason for his reluctance. Takumi then explains that in his homeland, the practice of buying and selling people was abolished long ago, making it difficult for him to come to terms with it here. Mulan acknowledges Takumi's concerns, but reassures him that, in this nation, the rights and privileges of slaves are at least maintained to a certain degree. Here's how it essentially works. The owner is responsible for providing the slave with essential needs like food, clothing, and shelter, while the slave is expected to fulfill specific duties outlined in their contract. The contract also includes a clause preventing either the master or the slave from causing lethal harm to the other. Takumi finds this arrangement reassuring, as it essentially turns the slave contract into something resembling a regular job with clearly defined rules. Mulan goes on to explain the different types of slave contracts. For instance, those who become slaves due to debt are contracted until they earn enough to repay what they owe. Permanent contracts, on the other hand, are typically assigned to criminals or war captives as an alternative to execution. However, most slave contracts result from people being illegally forced into slavery by bandits. Papik suggests that a war slave would be the best choice for Takumi since they cannot leave their master without permission. While Mulan can arrange this, she asks why it's so important for the slave to be bound in such a way. Papik starts explaining Takumi's exceptional production skills and the need to protect his secrets, but Mulan insists on hearing the reasoning directly from Takumi. Takumi clarifies that, as a producer, he wants to focus on his work, but managing quests from the Adventurers Guild makes that difficult. Living in a mansion, he also needs help with its upkeep. Moreover, due to certain unique skills he has, he needs assurance that his slave won't disclose any information about him. Lastly, because his quests involve harvesting ingredients and could be dangerous, he requires a slave who is also a skilled fighter to ensure their safety. Mulan quickly understands that Takumi doesn't have any bad intentions, but she firmly refuses to let him make a single slave handle both housework and combat. She's willing to do business with him only if he agrees to purchase 2 separate slaves for the roles. With that in mind, she mentions that she knows someone who would be perfect as a housekeeper and calls Maria into the room. Maria, who was forced into slavery as a child, has been trained extensively in reading, writing, mathematics, and general housekeeping, making her an excellent candidate for the job. Maria confidently states that she's capable of managing all the housework for a mansion on her own, which reassures Takumi. However, Maria notices that he seems lost in thought and asks if something is bothering him. Takumi tells her he's just a little confused since he doesn't understand why no one has bought Maria yet, considering how cute and capable she is. Maria gets all embarrassed by Takumi calling her cute, so he apologizes since it might have been inappropriate to say. Maria calms down and tells Takumi that she can only do the housekeeping work outlined in the contract and nothing else. Takumi says he's fine with that since he only wants her to do housekeeping work, but Maria wants to make it very clear that she won't do anything else. Takumi doesn't understand why she's talking about it so much since Mulan already explained how these contracts work, but then Maria blurts out that she can't sleep with Takumi. Takumi feels flustered as well, but reassures Maria that his intentions are genuine. He only wants her as a housekeeper, not anything inappropriate. With that clarified, Takumi asks Maria if she's still willing to form a contract with him, to which she happily agrees. With the matter settled, Mulan announces that she'll begin drafting the contract for Maria. However, when it comes to a battle servant, Mulan explains that she doesn't currently have anyone who meets the criteria. Hearing this, Maria calls her out, claiming that Sophia is still around. Mulan doesn't appreciate being challenged and sharply tells Maria to return to her room and start packing her belongings. After Maria leaves, Takumi asks Mulan if what Maria said is true. Mulan confirms that there is indeed a battle slave in the building, but warns that Sophia might not be a good match for him due to her many issues. Mulan attempts to end the conversation, but Takumi, intrigued, requests to meet Sophia. Reluctantly, Mulan agrees and takes him to her room. When they arrive, Sophia is startled to see that the visitor is the boy she encountered in the courtyard earlier. Mulan explains explains Sophia's background, revealing that she was captured as a war slave during the conflict between the Kingdom of Triaria and the Kingdom of Yugur events that took place over 50 years ago. Takumi is shocked to discover that Sophia is over 50 years old, leading Mulan to explain that the Kingdom of Yugur was an elf nation, and elves naturally have much longer lifespans. Mulan then details why Sophia has struggled to form a contract with anyone. She bears a noticeable scar on her ears, and both her right hand and left leg have limited mobility. These physical issues alone make her unsuitable for most seeking a battle slave, but on top of that, she has also lost her ability to use elemental magic, a defining trait of elves indicating she might be cursed. Given all this, Mulan doubts that Sophia could be of any help to Takumi on his quests. Despite her concerns, Takumi insists on assessing the situation himself and requests some time alone with Sophia. Mulan hesitantly agrees and leaves the room. Once they're alone, Takumi gently holds Sophia's face and looks into her eyes. Though he's not fond of using appraisal on people without consent, Takumi feels it's necessary to understand what he's dealing with. When he examines Sophia's status screen, he's stunned to see that her stats are incredibly high. While her injuries and curse do limit her abilities, Takumi realizes that if he can fix those issues, she would be an ideal battle companion. Soon after, Mulan returns to the room and asks if Takumi has made his decision. He confidently states that he wants to take Sophia. Surprised, Sophia reminds him of all her flaws, but Takumi assures her that he'll fix everything, so it won't be an issue. Impressed by his confidence, Mulan agrees to entrust Sophia to Takumi's care. A few minutes later, Mulan finalizes the terms of the contract, and the final step is to execute it. The three gather together as Mulan uses magic to bind them to the agreed terms. Once the process is complete, Maria and Sophia officially become Takumi's slaves. Maria expresses her gratitude to Takumi for choosing her and vows to work hard to meet his expectations. With Sophia echoing the sentiment, the trio eventually heads back to Takumi's house, and the moment he opens the door, Maple excitedly leaps out to greet him. Concerned for Takumi's safety, both Maria and Sophia immediately tense up, with Sophia preparing to attack. However, Takumi quickly stops her and explains that Maple is actually his pet killer spider. Though puzzled by the revelation, the two decide to accept it and act as if it's completely normal. A little while later, Takumi shows them to one of the empty rooms in the mansion. Sophia and Maria really like it, so Takumi tells them that Sophia can have this one and Maria can take the room next door. Neither of them can believe that Takumi is willing to give them their own rooms, but it's not like he's using the rooms anyway, so he thinks it would be nice if someone got some use out of them at least. Additionally, there is also a large bath. So he tells them that once they are done unpacking, they can use the bath whenever they like, and Maria is really excited about it. Later, while taking a bath together, Maria shares how pleased she is that Takumi chose to purchase Sophia as well. She admits she never believed Mulan would let Sophia go, as Mulan had spent the past 50 years refusing to sell her, no matter how much was offered. For Mulan to sell Sophia to Takumi, she must have seen something trustworthy in him. Sophia agrees that Takumi seems kind, but remains a bit wary since they know so little about him. During the contract preparations, Sophia caught a glimpse of Takumi's file and noticed that much of his background information, such as his hometown and lineage, was left blank. This makes her suspect that he might be intentionally hiding something. After they are done with their bath, they head outside and are shocked to see that Takumi already prepared dinner for them. Maria is especially devastated since household work is meant to be her job. So if Takumi handles everything himself, then she's as useless as a toilet. Takumi explains that he was just trying to make Maria's first day on the job a little easier, but if it makes her feel better, he will let her handle the rest of the chores on her own. For now, he asks them to sit down so they can all have dinner together. But Sophia is hesitant since servants usually don't get to eat at the same table as their master. Takumi understands that she may think his behavior is strange for a slave owner, but he doesn't want her to get stuck on tradition. On the topic of tradition, Takumi mentions that he's not particularly fond of being called master all the time and suggests that they call him by his name instead. Sophia, however, asks if this is a formal order. Takumi clarifies that he doesn't want to force her to call him by his name if it makes her uncomfortable. While Maria seems perfectly fine with addressing him by name, Sophia remains a bit reluctant. The next day, Takumi heads to Papex Trading Company to pick up a package he ordered. Papex says he did his best to wrap it up securely, but he still wants Takumi to be careful when carrying it home. On his way home, Takumi notices a church nearby, so he heads inside and kneels down to pray to Nolan. He thanks her for all the skills she gave him since they've really helped him, but there's something he's been meaning to ask her. In the time he has spent in this world, he learned that the Holy Empire of Sidonia controls the religious doctrine here, so he doesn't understand why Nolan has so much problem with them. At that moment, Takumi hears Nolan's voice and notices her standing before him, causing him to momentarily panic. Nolan calmly explains that she heard him praying to her and brought him here for a little chat. Addressing his earlier question, she reveals that she doesn't favor Sidonia because they don't follow her will. She goes on to explain that this world has two main religions, the Church of Creation and the Church of Divine Light. The Church of Creation has faithfully worshipped her since its inception, while the Church of Divine Light operates without regard for her guidance, doing as it pleases. The Sidonia Empire even launched multiple crusades to forcibly spread their religion. Throughout all this, Nolan chose to remain uninvolved, as she had no interest in meddling with humanity's petty disputes. Takumi points out that that was a dumb move since the only reason Sidonia was able to activate the summoning spell that brought him here was because Nolan didn't intervene until it was too late. And yeah, it sounds bad when he puts it like that, but she gave him all her blessings to make up for her mistake. Although, there is something she needs to tell him. Most of her blessings will remain with him forever, but there is one that will fade away, and that's the unusually great luck he has been having recently. She basically gave him a beginner's tutorial by allowing him to meet such nice and helpful people, but soon he will end up meeting people with malicious intentions. From now on, the results of his actions will completely depend on him. Shortly after, Takumi arrives home, only to trip over Maple, who eagerly greets him. Sophia and Maria rush to check on him, but when Sophia tries to take the package he brought, he quickly stores it in his item box to keep her from touching it. He then informs them that he'll be working in his workshop for a while and requests not to be disturbed. Sophia, noticing the package was wrapped in high-grade magical paper, grows suspicious, suspecting it might contain something dangerous. Unable to ignore her doubts, she follows Takumi to his workshop. There, she is shocked to witness him dipping a knife in poison, deliberately cutting himself, and immediately healing the wound. His actions seem bizarre and unsettling. When Takumi casually mentions Maria's name during his experiment, Sophia's suspicions intensify, leading her to believe he has sinister intentions toward Maria. She tries to attack him, but overwhelmed by exhaustion, collapses on top of Takumi instead. Takumi checks her status to figure out what's wrong with her, and he discovers that she is suffering from extreme exhaustion, likely due to her curse. A wound like this normally wouldn't be that difficult to heal, but because of the curse, it takes a lot of effort for Takumi to finally heal her hand. Once he's done, his light magic levels up. He later carries Sophia up to her room, and since his light magic leveled up, he now has enough power to dispel her curse, so he pours all his magic into it, and eventually, he's able to fully heal Sophia as well as lift her curse. She's still unconscious due to exhaustion, but she should be fine once she gets a little rest. A couple of hours later, Sophia wakes up, and upon seeing Maria, she urgently warns her to run, convinced that Takumi is completely insane based on what she witnessed earlier. Maria, however, has no idea what Sophia is referring to, but she's more certain than ever that Takumi is a genuinely good person. To prove her point, Maria holds up a mirror for Sophia, revealing the changes Takumi has made. Sophia is stunned to realize that her body has been healed and her magic restored. Determined to understand, Sophia steps outside to confront Takumi, who confirms that he successfully removed her curse. He explains that it required enduring significant pain and effort to level up his skill, but he reassures her that she doesn't need to feel burdened by it. After all, he had promised to heal her. Sophia comes to the realization that she had entirely misjudged Takumi. Overwhelmed with gratitude for the kindness he has shown her, she kneels before him and solemnly vows to serve him faithfully for the rest of her life. The following morning, Takumi makes his way to the library to search for information about alchemy, only to discover that the entire library contains just 4 books on the subject. Puzzled, Takumi wonders why alchemy isn't more widely practiced, especially since it seems so straightforward to grasp. However, the truth is that alchemy is far from simple. The available texts on alchemy are written in the ancient language of this world, and the only reason Takumi can make sense of any of it is thanks to the blessing Nolan gave him, which allows him to understand every language in this world. Later that day, Takumi, Maria, and Sophia finish making a large batch of toilets. While there's still plenty more to make, they've been making steady progress. Takumi figures he'll be able to take a break from toilet making for a while, since he won't be working on more toilets for the time being. Maria asks what he plans to do next. Takumi explains that he's planning to go on some journeys in the near future. Specifically, he wants to search for new alchemy ingredients, take in the unique sights this world has to offer, and maybe even explore some ruins along the way. He's already decided to take Sophia along as his bodyguard, so he's going to need Maria to stay behind and look after the house while he's away. Maria, however, isn't thrilled with the idea. She asks Takumi if she can join him on his journey, but he doesn't think it's a good idea since the trip is likely to be dangerous. Besides, he mainly hired Maria to take care of the mansion, so taking her along would defeat the purpose of having a maid. While Maria understands his reasoning, the thought of being left alone in the mansion makes her feel incredibly lonely, so she pleads with Takumi to reconsider. Takumi feels guilty about leaving Maria by herself, but before making a decision, he decides to check something. He grabs Maria's face and uses appraisal to examine her stats. To his surprise, Maria is quite impressive. Her skills are excellent, not overpowered, but definitely strong enough to hold her own in a fight. With that, Takumi agrees to let her come along, as long as she's confident she can handle the journey. Sophia offers to train Maria in magic and combat to ensure she's prepared for any potential dangers, and Takumi likes the idea. He then asks Sophia to train both him and Maria. Now that it's settled that Maria will be joining the expedition, Takumi decides it's time to start crafting equipment for everyone. Before getting to work, he asks Sophia what kind of weapon she'd prefer. Without hesitation, Sophia begins listing an extensive arsenal of weapons. She requests a longsword, a 2.5-meter spear, a bow, and 2 knives. That level of preparation is no surprise, given her experience as a seasoned warrior. Maria, on the other hand, isn't very familiar with weapons, though she did receive some basic short sword training from Milan. She tells Takumi that a set of battle knives should be sufficient for her. However, Sophia points out that relying solely on battle knives would leave Maria at a disadvantage in terms of reach, so she suggests adding a spear to her arsenal. Since Maria doesn't know how to use a spear, Sophia offers to give her some quick training to teach her the basics. While they work on that, Takumi gets started on crafting the weapons. It doesn't take him long to finish making all the blades, but the process uses up a significant amount of his mana, forcing him to drink a mana potion to recover before he can continue. The final step for the blades is for Takumi to cast an attack and auto repair enchantment on them, so he doesn't have to perform maintenance as often. Once that's done, the blades are finally complete. Now, he's going to move on to the handles, but since Maria requested battle knives, she's going to need a sheath for them, and even though Takumi is a gentleman, he's still a man of culture. So, imagining Maria's thick thighs with knives on them nearly makes him pass out. Next up, Takumi needs to craft armor for the girls. Instead of directly asking them to let him take their measurements, he comes up with a more convenient solution. He opens his item box and pulls out 2 life-size dolls of Maria and Sophia that he had previously created using his Appraisal X skill. Just don't ask why he made them in the first place. As for the armor itself, Takumi plans to make it using maple silk and some of the carapace and hide he got from the armored boar. When it comes to the design, he's never had the chance to make armor for others before, so he decides to let his mind run wild and try out all his outfit fantasies with those dolls. After several days and multiple redesigns, Takumi finally presents the armor to Maria and Sophia. Sophia, and it looks fantastic on them. He asks if they like it, and both are genuinely surprised by how perfectly it fits, especially since Takumi never took their measurements. It's almost as if he had exact replicas of them. Suddenly, Maple starts to spill the beans about the dolls Takumi used, but he quickly covers Maple's mouth before she can say anything further. To divert their attention and avoid suspicion, Takumi shifts the conversation, asking them what they think of the weapons he crafted for them. Sophia pulls out the sword Takumi made for her, and she says it feels perfect. The same goes for Maria as she tests out her battle knives, and she is grateful for the equipment he made for her. There's one more thing Takumi made for the two of them, so he pulls out some rings and tells them it should help with their magic casting. Sophia and Maria accept the rings, but they feel bad about troubling Takumi so much since rings like these are bound to consume a ton of mana. Takumi admits that it was exhausting, but it helped him level up his ice and lightning magic, so it was well worth the effort. Once all the equipment had been tested, the three of them head to the guild so Takumi can register Maria and Sophia as adventurers. Since it's their first time at the guild, Maria and Sophia are both assigned the H rank. While they're there, the receptionist reminds Takumi that he needs to complete at least one quest to maintain his adventurer status. Takumi then heads over to the mission board to look for a suitable quest. He's aiming to pick an H or G rank quest to keep things simple, but Sophia suggests he go for a higher difficulty quest instead, as it would help him raise his rank more quickly. A couple of bastards overhear that Takumi is H rank, so they think they can intimidate him into running away so they can have fun with Sophia and Maria. They tell Takumi that they are all D rank, so there's no way he could handle them all at once, and they have no problem with beating up a random guy for fun. Maria is about to step in and knock some sense into these idiots, but Takumi stops her and says he will handle it himself. He's absolutely terrified, but these guys not only disrespected him, but more importantly, they disrespected his friends, so he can't back down. The D rank adventurers are insulted that an H rank rookie like Takumi would dare to challenge them, so the pot-bellied guy throws a punch at him with all his strength. Takumi doesn't even bother dodging, letting the punch land, but the only one who gets hurt is the D rank guy, as he ends up breaking his hand from the impact. Suddenly, the guild master, Barak, arrives on the scene, demanding to know what happened since fighting is strictly forbidden in the guild. Initially, he assumes Takumi is the one at fault because Takumi is completely unharmed, while the other guy has a broken arm. However, Maria quickly defends Takumi, insisting he didn't do anything wrong. The receptionist also steps in to confirm their story, explaining that all Takumi did was stand there and take a punch to the face. The guild master still wants to get to the bottom of this, so for now, he asks someone to drive the potbelly guy away and tells Takumi and his party to come with him since he has a few questions to ask. He believes that Takumi was just defending himself, but he doesn't understand how he did it and would like an explanation. Takumi is a little uncomfortable about revealing personal skill information, but the guild master assures him that all this information will remain confidential. In that case, Takumi explains that when the guy threw the punch at him, he opened his item box and pulled out a bit of charcoal, which he then used to cover his body for defense. To make sure he wouldn't get hurt, he synthesized the charcoal into diamond. That explains how he broke that guy's fist without doing anything. While they're on the subject, the guild master suggests promoting Takumi to D rank immediately. It's clear he has the skills to qualify, and having a higher rank would deter fools like the last guy from targeting him just because he's accompanied by attractive women. However, Takumi feels it wouldn't be right to receive an automatic promotion for such a reason. Hans then proposes that Takumi and his party take on a few challenging quests to earn their rank promotion fairly. Both Sophia and Maria think this is a solid idea, so Takumi agrees to go along with it. The quest they were assigned involves exterminating goblins and kobolds and gathering marrow herbs. They head out into the forest to begin. Maple acts as the group scout and warns them that there is a group of 4 goblins ahead. Sophia takes the initiative and volunteers to handle the first 2, so she dashes forward and cuts them down in one swing. The remaining 2 are tripped up by Maple's web, and once they fall to the floor, floor, Maria and Takumi stab them through the neck. Takumi is pleased with how well they've been handling the monsters, but he can't help but notice just how many they've been encountering in this area. They've already taken down nearly 100 goblins and kobolds, which leads Sophia to suspect that there might be a monster encampment nearby. If that's true, then it's highly likely that a goblin general is present as well. A goblin general is a C-rank monster, meaning it would usually require at least 5 D-rank parties to defeat it. But with Sophia's spirit magic, Maria's earth magic, and Takumi's elemental magic, she is confident that they should be able to beat it. Takumi still feels a bit uneasy about taking on such a challenge, but since Maria and Sophia seem so confident in their strength, he's willing to go along with it, not to mention they still have Maple on their side. Out of nowhere, Maple informs Takumi that she's about to evolve and can no longer participate in the fight. Takumi nods in understanding and opens a pocket dimension for her to rest in. However, this leaves Sophia and Maria full of questions, wondering when Takumi learned to create pocket dimensions. Takumi casually dismisses their curiosity, claiming it's just one of his skills. More importantly, he points out that with Maple out of commission, they won't have as much support as they initially planned. Despite this, Sophia remains confident that they can still manage to succeed. They soon arrive at the goblin camp, and after a little reconnaissance, Sophia concludes that there are around 400 goblins here. Takumi asks her if they really have to fight all those goblins, and normally they would. But Sophia's reconnaissance also revealed that there are no humans in the area, so they are free to blow this place up with magic. The three of them prepare their strongest attack spells, and all at the same time, they unleash hell on the goblin camp. By the time they are done, almost all the goblins have been killed, so the only ones left are the goblin general and a few of the goblin knights. Sophia decides to take on the goblin knights, leaving Takumi to deal with the goblin general. Instead of engaging it directly with his spear, he chooses to set it on fire, quickly finishing it off. Once they confirm that all the goblins have been eliminated, they collect the magic stones and head back to the guild, completely drained from all the effort. The three of them can barely stand. Hans is astonished that they managed to complete their quest and even defeat a goblin general in just half a day. He then asks them to step into the meeting room because the guild master wants to have a word with them. Barak is both amazed and angry that Takumi would do something as reckless as face an entire goblin camp with this single party. But just as he is about to begin scolding Takumi, his pocket dimension opens up, and Maple pops out. She has now evolved into an arachne, so everyone is excited to see her new form. At this point, Barak decides to just let the whole reckless battle thing slide since Takumi's party clearly isn't normal. When they arrive back home, Maria asks Takumi if he has any spare cloth, so she can make some underwear for herself and Sophia. However, Takumi comes up with a much better design idea and offers to make it for her instead. Just then, Maple emerges from the pocket dimension and informs Takumi that Papek has arrived to see him. Takumi goes to meet him and learns that Marcus Godwin, the Lord of Bolton, has requested an audience with him. While Takumi would prefer to avoid meeting Marcus Godwin, the circumstances leave him with no other option. Takumi eventually arrives at Godwin's castle, and fortunately, Godwin turns out to be a reasonable man. The first thing he does is express his gratitude to Takumi for creating all those toilets, which have significantly improved the town's sanitation. He also acknowledges Takumi's efforts in taking down the goblin encampment, which would have posed a serious threat if left unchecked. Recognizing Takumi as a valuable asset to the nation, Godwin advises him to be cautious, as it's only a matter of time before Sidonia sets its sights on him. A few days later, Takumi finally completes the underwear for Sophia and Maria, but the process turned out to be much more challenging than he expected, leaving him completely exhausted. Sophia and Maria are thrilled with the results and praise the design, expressing their gratitude. Absent-mindedly, Takumi asks if they'd like to try the underwear on now so he can check the fit. A moment later, he realizes how inappropriate that sounded and bolts out of the room in embarrassment. Sophia and Maria, however, are a bit disappointed, as they were more than willing to do it if he had stayed. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.